On this episode of the Press for One Prince Lyrics podcast, we're covering a track from the Purple Rain era where Prince repurposed the title for a different song only a couple of years later, and that song is Love and Sex. Joining me on this episode is first-time guest CydneeC. Welcome to the show, CydneeC.
Hello, thank you for having me here.
Great to have you. Like I said, first-time guest, so that's always exciting.
Yeah.
I think, it is what it is. We want to get to know you, CydneeC. I think myself and the listeners would like to know a little bit more about you, and of course, specifically, where your introduction to Prince came from, what's your background with his music, how did you become aware of him? I mean, it's all very interesting to myself and to the listeners, so I would love if you wouldn't mind sharing some of that with us.
Oh, no problem. Well, like you said earlier, my name is CydneeC, but around Prince fans, I normally go by CydneeC. But anyways, I'm from Dallas, Texas. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I'm 18 years old. I'm a college student. And how I got into Prince, or how I was introduced to him, was by my mom and my aunt. So my mom loved the album Purple Rain. And every time like the movie would come on television, me and her would always sit down and watch it, and she would always ask me to identify different band members and all that type of thing. And my earliest memory of Prince in general was the When Doves Cry music video. Whenever MTV used to play music videos, that was a long time.
I can't believe you remember that.
That
was a long time ago.
Yes, that was a really long time ago. And it was the When Doves Cry video, and I remember like seeing the bathtub scene, and I was my little mind got to thinking. I was like 4 or 5 at that point. And whenever it comes to my aunt, she loved the song Adore, and she would always blast the song in the car. And that's how I got to know of him. And, I always heard his music around my family. My mom loved him. My aunt loved him, like I said earlier. But on the day of his passing, my mom actually came to my school. I was pretty young. I was in 6th grade, I believe. And she told me, CydneeC, Prince has passed away. And then once I got home from school, I started doing a lot of research on him. And I got on Instagram, going through different fan pages. And then all of a sudden, the Get Off video pops up. And let's say I was addicted to watching that small little clip of the Get Off video. And that ended up turning into me actually buying Get Off whenever it was put on iTunes. So it was the whole Purple Rain album, and Get Off is what I knew at that point. And after that, I took a little break. And then once the pandemic hit, I got bored. I was sitting in the house, and then I listened to Get Off because it just came back to my mind. And then all of a sudden I was like, you know what, let me just click on these different albums. And that's exactly what I did. That's how I got deeper into his music. And then I got on Twitter and met other Prince fans my age. And we all got in group chats. We started watching Prince concerts together, listening to his albums together. And yeah, that was how I got into Prince. And till this day, I'm still into him.
Love it. Love that story. I think it's really cool that, a lot of people, even myself, somebody who's older, got into or, became aware of Prince through my older siblings. So I find a lot of commonality with, no matter how old you are, certain people in your life kind of introducing Prince to you. Now, I would have found him eventually, but because I was young enough to experience the Purple Rain era in real time, but Little Red Corvette in 1999 were my introductions, and it was because my sister had bought the 45 singles, and we would play them on our parents' record player. And, it was just something different, something I'd never heard before, and I loved it. And I imagine that's kind of what you felt, watching the When Doves Cry video, listening to Adore, seeing Get Off. It's like, wow, this is cool. different, and I am fascinated by what this man is doing with this music and these videos and these visuals. I want to know more, and I suppose you were. Let me ask you this question, Cydney. Were you a bit overwhelmed by the amount of music that was presented to you when you started finding out how many albums he had written and recorded?
Honestly, no.
That's awesome.
Because I do listen to artists that they don't really have half of the discography that he has, and I kind of get a little annoyed with having to listen to the same 5 albums over and over again. So I was excited, actually. Like
That's
more
cool.
music.
Yeah, more music, please. Well, okay. So that, yeah, it's really difficult to get bored with Prince's music. If you get bored with Prince's music, it's because you're not expanding your horizons throughout his discography, and you're just listening to the same 3, 4, or 5 albums. It's really it's a shame if you don't listen to the entire 4-decade run that he had. So yeah, I can see how that would be exciting, especially during the pandemic when listening to music is just kind of like one of those things you do when you're alone and you're not really going anywhere. Perfect time, it would seem, on the surface to explore his discography for yourself. So awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that story.
Thank you for asking.
So as it pertains to the song of the day, we're going to be talking about Love and Sex 84, and I'm going to clarify the 84 version because this is a rare instance where Prince reused a song title for a completely different song. So this isn't like a re-recorded version that he did later. It's completely different songs, unrelated as far as I can tell, from sound, lyrics, everything. But, just likes the idea of using the title Love and Sex to kind of tell us what the song is about. Pretty on the nose, love and sex. But the themes, I feel, are different enough, and the music, of course, is very different, where this song fits right in with the Purple Rain era in terms of how it seems to be discussing themes of religion and combining that with sex and love, as the title indicates, and trying to find this balance between Prince's religion and his faith and his carnal desires, his desire for relationships, and of course the pleasures that go along with being in a relationship, and which was a pretty big part of his music throughout his career, but it really started coming out in the forefront, I think, during the 1999 and Purple Rain era. I mean, you can't get much more overt about it than the God sequence during the Purple Rain tour, where he just basically breaks everything down, has a little gospel sermon there and discussion with God in the middle of a pop rock concert, which is bizarre but cool at the same time. So yeah, this song was, according to Prince Vault, was recorded at Sunset Sound Studios in Hollywood in late February of '84, 2 days before he recorded When Doves Cry. So again, squarely in the Purple Rain era, which is where this song ended up being released as the one of the tracks on the Purple Rain Deluxe Edition from 2017. So that gives us some perspective of where his head was at. He was still having to create songs for this forthcoming movie and album, but then also writing a song like Love and Sex, which I don't know, Cydney. I don't know if you think that this was potentially being thought of as a song for the soundtrack. I mean, at this point, the soundtrack was pretty much done, with the exception of a couple tracks that they wanted to fill in some of the scenes. But all the live performance songs were obviously done, since they had to be done before they could make the movie. And really, just Take Me With You and When Doves Cry, the two montage songs from the film, were all that was left to record by early '84. So I just don't see this being a song that he had in mind for the album and the movie. But I could definitely be wrong. It could be in the potential B-side. It could have been just something he had and wanted to record because it was a cool idea, cool sound. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on its placement in the Purple Rain pantheon?
I'm gonna be honest. I don't think it was made to go on the album. If anything, I always felt like it was a B-side type of track. I've always thought of it being the B-side to like "Baby I'm a Star," but I don't see it fitting anywhere in the movie or on the soundtrack. I don't think he made the song to go on the Purple Rain album or in the movie.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't see it. But that's again, we're just speculating. We don't really know, but we know that he was still recording songs at this time for the soundtrack. But when he was being asked to come up with another idea, come up with a song, it was usually it was to have music over certain scenes in the film, like montage scenes or scenes of Prince and Apollonia driving out into the country, or scenes where Prince is being very contemplative about his relationship with Apollonia and kind of feeling bad about what he's done to her and how their relationship is seemingly falling apart before it even gets started. Love and sex, the theme of love and sex, as we'll go through the song and talk about the lyrics, doesn't seem to fit any montage scenes that I can think of, because Purple Rain doesn't really touch the movie, that is, doesn't seem to really touch a lot on religion and talk about God. Because they even take out the coat. Well, they don't take it out, but they kind of have a scene over it in the Purple Rain for Darling Nikki. So Darling Nikki ends with that backwards coda, which is basically a gospel prayer. And they don't perform that, of course, on stage during the movie. And that's really the only or one of the few religious references in the film or in the soundtrack. So again, I just don't see this being a part of the soundtrack either. So I agree with you there. A B-side would have been a really cool B-side to, an upbeat song that would have been released. But how can you argue against 17 Days and Erotic City as being the 1-2 B-side punch that we got for the first two singles?
Right.
Pretty tough. This was a Prince solo recording, so there was no involvement from members of the Revolution in its recording. We do have some background vocals that have been identified as Jill Jones's, but beyond that, all the instrumentation is Prince's, just like it was on When Doves Cry, so it kind of fits in with what he was doing and recording at Sunset Sound around this time, late February, early March of '84. And that's really all I have to say about this song, because there's not a lot known. There's not this amazing history around it or some intriguing story about how it was created or who it might have been sung about. Like a lot of songs we do from the vault, we are able to dive into a little more of discussion around what we think is the inspiration, or who was the inspiration, or where the song could have been slotted. Was it written for Vanity's sake? Was it written for Apollonia? Was it written for somebody else at the time? I think it was just a Prince song that he liked and wanted to get it out there, but then never found a home for it and moved on.
Mm-hmm. I believe the same thing.
But I'm glad we have it, because it is very of the era. It has that Linn-drum sound to it. It incorporates a lot of similar styles that Prince was making in '83, '84. So it's cool to hear another idea that fits in the same musical realm as these songs, because he moved on pretty quickly. Like Around the World in a Day doesn't have, it has some similarities. It has some threads that you can pull and find traces back to Purple Rain, but a lot of it is its own very distinct and different musical and thematic elements to it. Love and Sex, to me, does sound like a Purple Rain era song, which I like, because I like that album.
I've always felt like it sounded like it could fit on 1999 for some reason.
Sure. Yeah, those two albums have a lot of similarities. They're very Linn-drum heavy, and he started to move towards live horns later, like shortly after this. And this song is very kind of, I wouldn't say synthetic is the right word, but it just has that traditional early '80s Minneapolis sound to it, which was also very 1999. You're right. Okay, so I guess I'm ready to move on to talking about the lyrics of the song, the themes of the song. If you're ready, Sydney.
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. So the opening of the song, he just kind of does his 1, 2, 3, 4. He has an amazing Prince scream to kick it off. He says, "Come on, baby, hurt me," which is a kind of a line he uses. Hurt me uses the word hurt several times in this song, which
Mhm.
we'll talk a little bit about. What is he trying to say there? What are the thoughts around that? But then the actual first verse of the song is, "When we both die and go to heaven, will you still desire me? Or will he make you fire me? Will he let you hurt me in the upper room?" Okay, so I'm going to pass it to you. I'm going to pass the baton to you, Sydney. What do you see here in this first verse? What do you like about this? What this first verse is doing, and what are some themes that you are thinking that he's attempting to express here?
Okay, so in this first verse, I've always seen it as him being curious because um, in the afterlife, we always wonder, well, in heaven, will we be able to do certain things? Is this possible? And I feel like he was asking a necessary question, but I also I find it very funny. But overall on this first verse, I feel like he was asking basically like, hey, whenever we get to heaven, can we still have sex? Is this possible?
Yep, yep.
So, yeah, and that he always tries to incorporate religion in his things, and with this first verse, it's like he kicked off this song and basically put it in a genre of being a danceable gospel song, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's kind of what your themes are. So yeah, I agree. I mean, he doesn't use explicit language here. He is using it's coded, but it's easily decoded. That's because he starts it off when we both die and go to heaven. So he tells you exactly where the song or what he's referring to, what he's curious about, as you mentioned. He's curious about what life is like in the afterlife. Um, he says that let's go crazy. Things are much harder in the afterworld. Maybe
Hmm.
they're harder because you're not able to do certain things that you are able to do on Earth. And is sex one of them? Good question, right? I mean, he wants answers. He's looking for answers. Will you still desire me, or will he make you fire me? I mean, fire can be used as like it's like fire somebody is to remove them from the situation, whether it's a job or their life or whatever, from a relationship. But also, when you think of fire as an opposite to heaven, you think of hell, of course, and fire and hell is they go hand in hand. They're very the imagery is intertwined, fire and hell. So I like how he kind of plays around with that a little bit. Like, will we're in heaven, but will you make me go back down to hell because you don't want to be with me anymore? Or maybe God, because it says, will he make you fire me? So really it's God's decision whether or not Prince goes to heaven or hell, right? It's nobody else's decision. So is he saying, like, is God going to send me to hell because of some of the things that I've been singing music about, incest, oral sex, some of the more explicit language he used on 1999? Because we know he had a little bit of, I don't know if guilt is the right word, but crisis of faith at times about reconciling his dirty persona,
Hmm.
some of his explicit language that he used early in his career with his faith. I mean, that's essentially that is the theme of a song off of Around the World in a Day, Temptation, um, where he's asking for forgiveness, basically, for what he has, what he's been all about up to this point. So it's kind of interesting how he's, still thinking about those things, or, is starting to think about those things here in early 84. But then the last line in that verse, will he let you hurt me in the upper room? Okay, so I think it's pretty clear the upper room is heaven. It's a
Hmm.
metaphor for heaven. But the euphemism that he uses here, to hurt me, is not like, I don't think it literally means, to injure. I think he's talking about sex, right? I mean, that it sounds like you are in agreement.
Yeah.
He's wanting to know, will he let you have sex with me in the upper room in heaven? But I just find it fascinating that he uses that euphemism for sex to say, hurt me. Come on, baby, hurt me. And we know that is it can have connotations and connections to S&M, sadomasochism, and a theme that just a couple years prior Prince was singing about pretty overtly in Automatic.
Yeah.
And the music video that went along with Automatic really laid it out pretty clearly that, yeah, the song has lots of aspects of S&M to it, as Prince gets tied to the bed by Lisa Coleman and Jill Jones. That's one of the more, I find it to be a fascinating music video and song. That's why Automatic is one of my all-time favorite Prince songs, because it goes places that his lyrics didn't often go. It takes us on a journey, and it's lengthy song too. So this calling this hurt me, but using it as like I said, a euphemism for an enjoyable act is fascinating to me. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to be honest. I felt like it was very genius, and in this case, I feel like it just showed his lyricism, and how he, in some ways, even though he wasn't the biggest fan of the rap music, but in this case, I feel like this was very, very rap-like. The overall message itself I would say in some sense is funny, because who comes up with this stuff? And and I don't know how to describe it other than it's just very Princey. I can't see anybody else coming up with these type of metaphors and things like that. And coming up with this message is very Princey.
Yeah, for sure. And I like the fact that he didn't come up with this out of nowhere for the song, nor would he abandon the notion that S&M, if we're just going to blanketly call it that, interjecting a bit of pain into your pleasure, wasn't something that he never did before or after. I did a little bit of digging, and I remembered, I don't know, this isn't really having to do with S&M, but he mentions in the song Soft and Wet, he says, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, with, his sugarcane will cause them pain. I'm going to lose my sugarcane on you if you can stand the pain. I mean, I explained in that episode what that is likely referring to, but he mentions, he brings up the pain, aspect of that sex can also have, depending on the person's, or depending on what they're doing, or the person's, how much experience they have. Let's put it that way. But then later on in the 90s, he explored S&M a little bit again in songs like Pheromone off of the Come album. Even talks a little bit about it in I Hate You, like tying his lover up and pleasuring her while she's tied up. So, and of course we already talked about a little bit about Automatic. So it's certainly something that he would dive into this topic, this kind of taboo-ish topic, on occasion. Rarely would it be talked about in a song that was intended to be, a widespread crossover hit. I Hate You was released as a single, but at this point, it was mostly just played on black radio stations. It wasn't a crossover to white audiences or pop stations a whole lot.
Right.
So I just enjoy the fact that this is not something that he ever really kind of abandoned or gave up. Like certain things, like he gave up on the cursing. We know he did that. He stopped cursing at a certain point in his career. But Prince still was kinky, you know. I think he still had some kink in him throughout his entire life, and even into the 2010s, you can find references to, maybe less overt, but references to this type of enjoyment of kinkier aspects of sexual intercourse.
Right. One thing I forgot to mention was, it's a common fact that Prince has always associated sex with like spirituality, and I feel like that also goes in further of this song, and tying it to God like he has always done. And it's just I would like to point out that this was, like you said, it was a continuation of this same running message that he had basically throughout his whole career. But yeah, that's all I want to say on that part.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So this is just another song in a long line of songs that he wrote where he's talking a bit about religious iconography, talking about God, Jesus. Sometimes he says them overtly. Sometimes you have to figure out that he's talking about it, like in Let's Go Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But also making sure that it doesn't get too preachy, because the song is ultimately about sex and love,
Right.
but it just happens to be in the context of somebody who is religious, who knows and believes in the afterlife, and as you mentioned earlier in the episode, is curious about that. Like, this is something I enjoy doing here on Earth. If heaven is supposed to be this great place, does that mean that I can continue to do this? And can I do this with you? Meaning like this person that he's singing the song to, because he's talking about as somebody specific. He's just not generally saying, hey, I'd like to have sex in heaven. God, can I do that? He's talking about somebody else, somebody very specific. When we both die and go to heaven, will you desire me? He wants to, he's hoping that this person that he's in love with or in a relationship with, they will be able to continue to enjoy each other in that way after they pass.
Mm-hmm.
So the chorus is sha-la-la-la, sha-la-la-boom. Come on, baby, hurt me in the upper room. Sha-la-la-la, sha-la-la-boom. Love and sex in the upper room. And he'll say, just throw some ad-libs, all right, hit me, yeah. But essentially the lyrics of the chorus are not super deep, it's just kind of reiterating the same concepts that we've been talking about already. Hurt me in the upper room. Okay, so when we go to heaven, I really want you to still desire me, want to have sex with me, and I want to be able to do that.
Right. The chorus of this song always reminded, I hate to bring this person up, but the chorus of this song always reminded me of a Michael Jackson song. In Michael's early Motown days, when his solo album, it was called Forever Michael, and he had a song on there called Dapper Dan, and he also did the Sha La 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 Boom. So that's why I always think of Michael when the chorus of Love and Sex comes on when I'm listening to it. I love making parallels between the two because I'm a big fan of both.
No, I love it. Yeah, I mean, there's no way that. I mean, I can't be convinced that Prince didn't listen to Michael's music. I just can't be convinced of that. If for no other reason, to understand Michael was very popular and what made him popular. So Prince is a music studier.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't live in a bubble. He was well aware of other musicians' work, and he would tell very frankly people if he liked it or not. Like, he wasn't afraid to be honest and forthcoming with his opinions on other people's music.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly he had to be aware of the album you're referring to in the song. Okay, so then with the second verse, it is, when we both cry and want each other, will you still resist me, or will you come and kiss me? How am I supposed to sleep without you in my arms? So this second verse seems a little bit more traditional in its depictions of love and sex. I think a bit more, because it doesn't it doesn't reference the upper room. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't reference God so much. It's just more about talking about their relation. It feels like he's just talking about their relationship. And they apparently have some dynamic where it's like a cat and mouse game going on here, because he mentions, will you still resist me, or will you come and kiss me? So I'm wondering if we're getting the picture of this relationship being a bit rocky at times, or potentially it's still very early where the woman isn't quite sure if she likes him that way, or likes him enough to always give in to what he's asking her. When we both cry and want each other, that's the part that is kind of interesting to me. I'm not exactly sure what he's referring to for cry there. More is like when they both cry, meaning when they are sad because they miss each other, or sad because they've been fighting, or other. I'm not sure. What do you think about that line, when we both cry and want each other?
I always saw it as a mixture of like both being upset with each other, but also missing each other. And, like you said, of course, it's a rocky relationship, and something happened to cause them to, feel sad and miss each other, but also and on the woman's part, not want to be with him. Well, at least in that moment. Yeah, I just always saw it as a mixture of two, being upset and also missing a person, which is very common in relationships. I think it's always been that way.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of that, yes, it's just a mixture of both.
Yeah, so you and I have basically the same thoughts on it. So if anybody's listening to this episode and you have like a different interpretation of what he's referring to when he says, when we both cry and want each other, I'd like to hear it, because Cydney and I are basically on the same page, which is cool
Right.
for the episode, but it may not be right.
Right.
Or it may
Right.
not be wrong either. I mean, there is no right and wrong, really, if you think about it. Okay, yeah, and again, they seem to have a rocky relationship, like I said, cat and mouse situation going on, where she at times resists him for whatever reason that she has. But then they seem to often kiss and make up.
Right.
And that last line, how am I supposed to sleep without you in my arms? So this whole second verse doesn't really seem to be talking a whole lot about what the chorus in the first verse is referring to, where Prince is wanting to know, can they have sex in heaven? It's just more about in the moment, I think, like on earth, this is our situation.
Mm-hmm. Because, he's still asking these questions while he is alive. He's asking these questions that a lot of people normally think of, but normally don't say it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, each verse is filled with questions.
Right.
There's line after line of just questions that go unanswered, of course, because it's not a back and forth song. So these are things that he wants to know more about. He wants to know about heaven. He wants to know, where does he stand with this woman, and what's their relationship like.
Right.
So then we get to the second chorus, and it's identical for the most part. I mean, he throws a lot of like ad libs into the song. So he'll say, "Good Lord, yeah," it's one point in the chorus, but it's an ad lib. It's not. I don't think it was something that he wrote down.
Right.
The basic of the basis of the chorus here is the same. Sha-la-la-la, sha-la-la-boom. Come on, baby, hurt me in the upper room. Sha-la-la-la, sha-la-la-boom. Love and sex in the upper room. And the only thing I wanted to mention about the title, Love and Sex, and how he's talking about it in the chorus is that they're not separate here. It doesn't appear to be. Like, they are one and of the same.
Mm-hmm.
And we, again, like in Temptation, he makes it very clear that love is more important than sex.
Right.
And this is how he repents, by admitting that, this is now, he sees it now. He sees the light. Love is more important than sex. In this song, love and sex they seem to be on equal footing. Mm-hmm. in terms of importance. because he doesn't say, well, I mean, he just never talks about one without the other. It's all the same. Love and sex in the upper room. Like, we love each other and we're going to have sex with each other in the upper room. Not just one or the other. Like, I'm not going to just love you. I don't want to just love you in the upper room. But I certainly don't want to just have sex with you. I want both. I want them together because, you know, you have to kind of believe that, at least for this song, he feels that they are intertwined. Can't have, if you have one without the other, then you're not completely fulfilled.
Right.
The bridge is a little bit interesting as well, but it kind of just talks a lot more about where they're at, I think, in their relationship. Not too sad. Too sad. Happy. Too happy. Just one single sexy glance or two. That's what kind of party is the cool. Sha-la-la-la. Sha-la-boom. I put on my Sunday best. His clothes so sharp. Shaboom. Okay, so, you know, I mean, a lot of this kind of sounds nonsensical, a little bit nonsensical when you just read it out loud, but it sounds cool in the song. So people listen to the song if you want to hear how this actually sounds and not just me reciting it.
Right.
But that's kind of what I'm getting from this is like when he says not too sad, happy, too happy. I just kind of get a bit like he's talking about how where the relationship is at the moment. It's in a good place, but it's not, you know, to say it's not too sad. So that kind of implies that there is some sadness there at times, but it's not too sad. Don't worry. It's not like depressingly sad. It's just has its moments. We have our moments together.
I've always seen this breakdown as him like in a hypothetical sense of him actually being dead and there being a funeral. And normally in different religions such as Christianity and a few others, basically when people die, normally at funerals, they're like, you know, people normally tell each other, oh, don't be sad, they're in a better place. And whenever he says not too sad, happy to heaven, I feel like he's saying, oh, don't worry, I'm in a better place now. And, you know, he ends up referring to his Sunday best. And we all know whenever people get buried, that people normally try to dress them really well, to the nines.
Yep.
But and normally after funerals, there's a repast, and normally that's a time for celebration, especially in communities of color. After funerals, we normally try to celebrate the life of that person. So, you know, whenever he says that's what kind of party is the cool, I feel like that's the celebration of life itself. I've always seen it as that.
I like that. Now that you say that, it seems to be pretty obvious to me. Putting on Sunday best, his clothes is so sharp, you know, like I could see somebody saying that as they're looking at their loved one that has passed. He looks sharp. Like he looks really good in that sharp outfit that they dressed him in for his funeral. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and then it can be referred to as a party when you're celebrating somebody's life. Not that they passed, but the life they lived up until their passing, and a celebration of that. So yeah, it totally makes sense. I dig that. Thanks for bringing that up. The rest of the song gets a bit repetitive. There is the third verse. He starts like a lot of third verses. He adds some elements that are similar or the same, but then tweaking them slightly. So he still repeats the line from the first verse, when we all die, except he changes it. Instead of when we both die, when we all die and go to heaven, will he let us fantasize? Or is there some new cool surprise? Let's all try to come together before we go. Okay, so there's some language here that you can interpret a couple different ways, which was, of course, something Prince loved to do, is give us food for thought or give us multiple ways to interpret a line. In that last line, let's all try to come together before we go. I get a couple different meanings here. One that's a bit more sexually driven, and one that's just a nice thought. Like if you're thinking world peace, let's all come together and live in peace and harmony before we go. I would like it if when we die, that we died in a world that there wasn't so much hatred. But then there's let's all just try to come together. Like let's have as much sex as we possibly can before we go, because we still don't have an answer whether or not God is going to let her hurt him in the upper room. So we don't really know. So why risk it? Let's do it as much as we can while we're on Earth. Let's all try to come together before we go. Can certainly be interpreted that way as well. Do you agree with that, Cydney? Do you have any other alternative interpretations of that line?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, but with the third verse, a lot of okay, I feel like Preacher Prince came out. A lot of younger fans always kind of refer to him whenever he's preaching on a song as Reverend Nelson. So Reverend Nelson came out right here instead of including himself and another woman, like he did change it to all. And it's like whenever he says all, I just think of like a congregation because of the Reverend Nelson thing. And he goes back to asking these questions and how I interpret it, even though I do agree with your double meaning of let's all try to come together before we go. But I've always seen it as him speaking to a congregation, and it's like, what, let's join hands and be peaceful and make everything right before we go. And I feel like that's where the love aspect of the song also comes in on that last line.
Yeah, I like that as well. The line, will he let us fantasize, or is there some new cool surprise? I don't know if he's just trying to say here that will we be able to, very simply put, can we be kinky in heaven? Like can
Right.
we do things that are a little out of the norm? Is it okay? Are we going to be judged? When he's hoping that that's not true. Or is there some new cool surprise? Like, hey, is there something in the upper room waiting for us that we can't even envision here on Earth? Like, we have no idea what's in store for us. And that would be really cool if that was the case, is what I think he's trying to say here. Is there something that we can look forward to that we don't even have a clue about? It's a nice way to think, like, are we just going to basically live the exact same existence in heaven, just no longer with our earthly bodies? Or is there something even better that we're just not sure what that is, and we just have to wait, like on Christmas Day? So after that third verse, though, the rest of the song is pretty much just Prince ad-libbing and doing his, some scatting here and there, but it's a lot of repetition of a lot of the same lines from the chorus. Repeating of "Come on, baby, hurt me in the upper room," "Love and sex in the upper room," "Hurt me in the upper room." A lot of shalalalas, shalalabooms. Not much else that's different. Again, I think your Reverend Nelson comment is apt, because he tries to get some call and response here, which is very Baptist church or Southern churches use a lot of this type style of try to get the congregation to participate. Let me hear you say, yeah, all right, oh Lord, and he's again, I think he's attempting to get some interaction and the congregation, so to speak, to join in and celebrate with him. Do you have any other thoughts on that? Do you agree, or do you think something else is worthy of calling out here?
I agree. I feel like the outro, in my opinion, is just choir time and for his congregation to interact with him. So yes, I agree with what you just said.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's cool. I mean, the song is longish. It's a little over 5. It's like, I don't know, 5.5 minutes. But a lot of it is like just music and this style of singing, where he's repeating lines and ad-libbing and asking for participation from the listener or from the audience, which again is a shame because he never played the song live. It was never released in his lifetime, so he never really see that through, see, you know, his vision of having this section be a call and response, or you get people to you know, party and jam out with him at the end of the song. Never really happened, but that's okay. I mean, we can do it now in our living rooms, or, you know, if we're ever in a virtual or in-person celebration with this song comes on, we can do it then, I suppose, right?
Right, right. But until then, just like, you know, he said in the song, all we can do is fantasize about it.
Yep. Yep. Can we fantasize? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Prince. Okay, well, I think that will bring us to the end of the song, since there isn't much more to talk about in terms of the lyrics. Do you have any final thoughts, Cydney, on the song itself, or anything that you feel we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
The only thing I would have to say is it's a great song. It's a the message of the song is one that he recycled a lot, and it has a great purpose. His lyricism always came out with songs relating to sex and spirituality and love, and basically I feel like this song was another way for him, you know, to spread his message and get it out to the people, and you know, him showing how he was always defying the norms, because in religion and in a lot of religions we are taught not to question God, or not to question a lot of things that we are told, or you know, the things that we don't know. So this is him again defying the norms, being Prince, and that's why I love him. He defies
Mm-hmm.
the norm, and it's just Princey. It's a great song, and I want to say shout out to Perla if you're listening. She put me onto the song. That's all I have to say.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that's a great way to end the episode. So, Cydney, can you share where people can find you on social media, if you don't mind?
Well, normally just for Prince, I'm normally on Twitter. My at name, please don't laugh, I'm going to say it. Okay, I was like 16 when I made it. But my at name is at Paisley Park Crip. And if you just wanted to search for me just by name, you can type in CydneeC. Cydney spelled Cydnee, and just a C. If you wanted to follow me on Instagram, because I am a singer, I'm a dancer, and I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I play guitar and piano. You could find me at _ Cydnee, just like how I spelled it, Cydnee, and then my middle name Elise, ELISE _. So _ Cydnee Elise _. That's where you can find me.
Great, great. Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you volunteering to join me today, talk about love and sex. I've been wanting younger Prince fans to come onto the show, and you stepped up. So thank you for that.
Thank you for allowing me to come.
Of course. Glad to have you. This has been the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. I've been your host, Jason Brenninger. You can find the show at pressrewind.net. Also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Just type in Press Rewind or Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast, and you'll find the show. I also have links to those different social media outlets on the show notes. Thanks again to Cydney, and until next time, goodbye.